Good afternoon. Today I have with me Rajesh. He's an engineering manager at Google. Welcome to Managers Club.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Rajesh and I were talking about business critical projects and how you lead them and execute them without burning out your team. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. Let's just start out, Rajesh. What's a business critical project? Because like all these projects are critical, right? You got to get them all done. So what's the difference?
Yeah. So business critical projects, when I talk about them, they're typically your company responding to market trends. It could be that they fail to anticipate a competitor building a very strong product, or it could be a very sudden market trend. And like these changes are typically, these sort of projects typically are sudden, like they reset roadmaps and like you have something planned and then like someone comes from leadership comes to you and hey, no, we're gonna have to like get rid of all of that and we're gonna have to like work on this new thing. So it almost always resets roadmaps. It's very sudden. There's an expectation that you move really fast. It is typically considered high impact projects. Like it makes a big difference to the business. And the most common scenario is that there is a lot of leadership visibility. It goes up oftentimes all the way up to the CEO, but most of the times, up to the head of the product. So these are typically the shape that business critical projects take. From an engineering team's perspective, I feel like they're often a crash course in effective product building. You go through a lot of things very fast, and it can be an incredible learning opportunity and a period of significant growth for your team. But there's also an opportunity for your team to burn out if you don't manage expectations and workload effectively. I can share personal anecdotes of this happening in the past where like before Facebook, I'd been working at a gaming company and I was an IC on one such project. And at first, everyone was like really excited to be on this project. And we worked long hours, we worked weekends to get the project shipped. But when we were close to the end, I think someone in leadership thought like the product design needed to be different and it almost completely reset the visual experience of the app. And this sort of deflated the team quite significantly. And the TL decided that he didn't want to work on it anymore and like he switched teams. And the director, who had been very hands on until that point, suddenly decided that they didn't want to be hands on. And so this sort of shook the entire team's sentiment on the effort. And while I did see the whole project through, by the end of it, I knew I was done at that company. I was like, I had given this project my all and I didn't want to do it anymore. And so I switched companies and then I moved to Facebook. And I've heard similar stories from a lot of colleagues where they go through these like intense projects. And at the end of it, there's like this mass exodus on the team where people are like, yep, I'm done with this. I'm not going to do this anymore. So that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing that you want to watch out for, where it is an opportunity for a lot of growth for people on the team. But unless carefully managed, it can lead to a state where the team feels burned out.
Okay. Yeah, there's so many things I want to ask you about here. Certainly, yeah, people can get burned out. So let's take that. So how do you push your team to perform at a really high level? You have this high visibility project, tight deadline, but you don't want them to burn out and leave at the end. So what do you do?
So I like to think of team motivation and morale almost like a bank. You have to build it up, you have to deposit into it. And like when there's necessity, you withdraw from it. But if you withdraw too much, you hit a wall. And if you have business critical projects just like lining up one after the other, that is a surefire way to burn your team out. There, you have to have peaks and troughs in how intense the work is for the team. So the way I think about it is I like to build sub teams that are in themselves cohesive units. And if you have one sub team, I think there's a sports analogy somewhere in there, but if you have one sub team that is on a business critical project right now, the next one is should not be the same sub team. You have another sub team that's built out as another cohesive unit, and you want to bench the first team, and you want to have the other sub team go work on it. And I think there was this Harvard Business Review article I read a while ago. I think it's quite old, it's 20 years ago, but it talks about looking at, corporate employees like athletes. And it talks about how people in weightlifting work on like muscle building. And the way they look at it is that you have to break down the muscle for it to grow. But if you keep breaking it down, you're eventually going to damage the muscle. But if you damage the muscle and then you give it nutrition and then time for rest and recovery, then it goes back to being much stronger. And then the next time around, it performs better. So I think it's important to look at these opportunities as a chance for your team to significantly grow. But if you keep pushing them towards these opportunities without giving them time to rest and recover, you're going to reach a place where the team eventually burns out. And what is rest
Okay.
and recovery in the software world? It is your tech excellence projects. It is your projects that don't have as tight deadlines. It is taking time to improve the architecture on your product. It is taking time to bug fix. It's those things.
Okay. I want to go back to something you said earlier and about leadership. Okay. Lots of times these business critical projects, right? They're high, very high visibility with leadership. And so I have two questions to you. One is, I'll just start with this one and then we'll go to the next one. How do you communicate these things to leadership? And I'll give you a second one. Like, how do you set their expectations? Because I think lots of times these business critical projects, they come with unreasonable expectations. And this is why the team burns out because we really need this thing, Rajesh, and we need it by June 1st, hell or high water. And then how do you push back or how do you manage that or what do you do when leadership comes with you with this opportunity?
Yeah. So I think the big thing to talk about is resourcing on your team. I think structuring every discussion around what it takes to get something done is the most productive discussion to have. And so when I'm faced with such a discussion, like I go back to my team and I have a discussion around, hey, like this is something we have to build. What is a reasonable expectation on like how long this will take us to build? And so that factors quite significantly in my discussion with leadership around saying, hey, so this is the team that we have, so this is exactly what you can get done, and if we push really hard, this is the farthest we can go. And so all of my discussions with leadership is structured around like how much you can get done with the resources that we have. And if leadership thinks that this is significant enough that we have to put additional resources into it, then that is the right way to go.
Okay, so that's one thing the manager's doing, right? So you're negotiating with leadership in these high profile business critical projects. What are some of the other things that a manager that you do and maybe things you also do differently when it's one of these projects than you do a regular project?
So I think there's a number of different things that come to mind. So first, just building the right sort of team for a business critical project. I think it, I almost at this stage it's almost formulaic for me where you need a few different types of engineers on the team when you build a team for a business critical project. You need that one person who will always insist on doing things the right way. You need the one person who will insist on just getting things done. And both of these engineers, they work effectively with each other and balance each other out. I think that is a great combination to have on these projects. And the third, I'd say, type or archetype of engineer I would want on such a project is the sort of engineer that does glue work. And for those who don't know what glue work is, it is all the unglamorous work that has to happen in order to ship the project. So it could be things like aligning with cross functional teams, resolving dependencies, working with your PM, working with your product designer in like unblocking work, working with your program manager in unblocking work. It is all the different things that has to get done, but is often, like I said, very unglamorous. And so building this right sort of team is very valuable. And if you're able to create that combination of engineers, I think that is a big factor in having a successful business critical project.
Okay. Like, we go back to that, you're the engineering manager. So what do you do differently? Like, how do you get more involved or involved differently when it's this high stakes project?
Yeah. So after building, I talked about building teams, right? So I think the glue work thing becomes much more important in these projects. And as an engineering manager, you often have to get involved yourself. And,
Sure. Yeah.
and so the most common type of glue work that I've had to participate in as an engineering manager is your cross functional team of PMs, product designers, and like program managers. It isn't always set up in a way that is effective for you. I've noticed that it's almost never in the most ideal forms. For example, you may have a product manager who's new to the team. Anyone like is just ramping up. You may have a program manager who's only able to give half their time to the project. Maybe they're doing spending half their time on another project, and so building that sort of intuition and instinct for their share of responsibilities and being able to contribute and fill any gaps, and that is really valuable skill to have as a manager. And I've it's almost a running joke at this point, the sort of like contentious relationship between engineering and product. But I'd say learn the sort of what your product manager wants, learn what your product designer wants, learn what your program manager wants, and help them fill any gaps in understanding, help them fill any gaps in execution. And I think that'll lead to a much more successful outcome.
Okay. I want to go back to this thing about building the team, right? Now, a lot of people who listen to Managers Club, they're either new managers or they want to be a manager. So maybe they didn't get to build the team. They came in and here's your team. So, what would be your advice to new engineering managers or people in that situation where this critical project comes, but you have the team that you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. In general, I'd say I talked about how like motivation is almost like a thing that you hadn't removed from, right? So if you're handed this team, particularly like if the team's not in a great place motivation wise, I think you've been dealt a difficult hand. And I like to think of motivation as a few different things. And particularly when you think about burning out, a lot of times burning out is less due to like extreme hard work, but more from people just not feeling like there's meaning in their work. And I like to think of it as understand any lack of motivation on the team, see if it's misalignment with the overall mission of the team, see if it's misalignment with incentives, see if it is misalignment with personal motivations for people on the team, and try and resolve those. But if you've literally just been handed this like brand new team and you're asked to execute on this business critical project, I think as much as possible as a manager, I'd say shield the team from the constant, the additional poking and prodding that you get on these business critical projects, and orchestrate high performance the way you think is most effective. This is like yet another analogy, but I don't have you seen the Fast and Furious movies?
I saw the first one, but go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, first one. Yeah, I think the first one is very relevant. So if you've seen the drag races, so they're just like straight races. The cars just like go straight, they go really fast. But all of them have nitrous oxide. Where they push a button and it gives them temporary acceleration towards the goal.
Yep. Yep.
And that not all of them use it effectively. So there's some people that use it when they're already going too fast and then the engine blows up. There's some people that use it too soon and then it gives them that boost and then they start decelerating and then they don't end up at the finish line. So even if they have this additional technology that helps them move faster, unless you orchestrate the use of the nitrous oxide at the right time, you don't end up winning the race. I think that's what from the very first race in the movie. And I think that's a great analogy for the manager injecting themselves in these kind of like business critical projects where you have specific moments in the project where you can say, you know what, we if let's say you're working in sprints, let's take this one sprint and give it 150%. And you have to like time it very well. Otherwise, if it's very close to the end of the project, there's already like these huge stressors from like leadership breathing down on you, and there's launch deadlines and all of those. So I wouldn't do it too close to the end. I would almost do it like several weeks before the end so that it actually relieves some stress from the end of the project and say, oh, we actually got much more done because we took this one sprint to go as hard as we could. And I'd say as a manager, learn the instinct to push the nitrous oxide button at the exact right moment and go to the team and be like, hey, everyone, we need to get this done. So let's go as hard as we can for the next couple of weeks, but have a strict deadline for when you're pushing the team hard. Like you have to stop at some point and hopefully time it in a way that you say, you know what, if we get this done, we'll be in a very good place. And then everything else can be much more smooth sailing than it is now.
Okay, I think it's a great analogy. Yes, I remember that with they press it at the wrong time, and so it's not effective. I want to go back to motivation. So you said you're talking about motivating your team. Are there any specific things you do to motivate your team? And maybe are there any like counterintuitive or not unobvious things that you do to motivate your team in this situation?
Yeah, I think it, in a lot of ways, it comes down to personal motivations for the team. You can have someone on the team that is very like personal growth oriented, and it could be that they see this as an opportunity to see significant career growth, high visibility, high impact, like great career growth. And so if that is their motivation, then you offer them exactly that. Like you put them, you make sure they're able to execute effectively, and you put them in a position to succeed. And you're you need to have systems in place at the company where, you know, like the impact and the effort is rewarded with that career growth. Like personal motivations vary. It's not always like career growth. For some people it could be just mastery of whatever it is they're working on. For some people it could just be, hey, I like autonomy, I like the work that I'm doing, I'm perfectly satisfied here. So you really have to understand their individual motivations and cater to those specific needs. And once, so it's, I look at it as a fairly long process where you work with the team to give them what they want out of that job and build up that motivation. And when the time comes for like these business critical projects, you say like, hey, everyone, it is now is the time to go hard and deliver on such a project.
Okay. What if you happen to have some underperforming team members or an underperforming member, and now you're in this like critical moment? How do you handle it? What do you do? Do you just not have them work on the project, or do you somehow, how do you manage that with someone whose performance is struggling?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the right approach is to keep them on the project, but in a way that they can continue to learn from it, but introduce additional people into the project and have them take out some of the load. Because there could be a lot of reasons for underperforming. Like these business critical projects, they are high pressure. They come with a lot of visibility from senior leadership. You're often like doing reviews with them. As a manager yourself, like you feel that pressure from leadership, and sometimes you try you the ideally you're shielding your team from that sort of pressure, but sometimes you yourself end up putting some of that pressure on the team, and that can lead to some underperformance on the teams. Understand what is the reason for the poor performance. If it is just that they're feeling the pressure, help them ease some of that pressure. But if you find that like it is something that you'll have to like work with them on, like work with them to improve performance at a later point, keep them on, but in a way that they continue to learn from it, but they're not acting as a bottleneck for the overall effort, and bring in additional people or have someone else share responsibilities with them on the project.
Okay. Oh, you mentioned a couple times like leadership, right? So in these scenarios, like leadership can just be breathing down your neck. We need to have this. What's going on? Tell me. What's the delay? Why can't we have it? Et cetera, et cetera. So, how do you effectively protect your team or shield them from that? Because to some extent, they need to know this is really important and we need it. So, what do you do in that case? What's your approach?
So I think you have to be pretty explicit with your team that this The deadline is non-negotiable, that this has high visibility, that this is high impact, and that this is very critical to the business. I think shielding the team is not the equivalent of like not giving them the information they need to operate effectively. So yes, give them complete information on what sort of project they're working on. They have to know. But like shielding the team from leadership here is, for example, if your director keeps checking in on status, or if your director pushes you to deliver on an earlier date, or if your director pushes you to add more features to what is already a hard deadline. I think those are the things that you want to, that sort of trash is what you want to shield your team from. And you have to push back, and you have to push back hard. And it is not easy to do because you get a lot of this is important for the business. Like, this is the time that you push the team to perform hard. And you're the one that knows that the team is already like going hard, and that if you push them past a certain point, like, it is not healthy and it is not good for the long term motivation and the health of the team. And so it is something you have to push back hard on with senior leadership and say, if they want to add features, okay, we can add this feature. If this feature is important, what can we trade it off with? If they're pushing for earlier dates, negotiate if like we can have one or more features removed. I think having the sort of options that would say, okay, like, if you want this particular outcome, you can get that outcome, but it would come at the cost of this. The cost that you're referring to has to be the cost in terms of what is in the project. I think that is the discussion that is worth having with leadership. And the cost should almost never be, okay, like the team will work like 4 hours more per day. I think you have to push effectively in saying, okay, if you want this done, then it will come at the cost of something else.
Okay. In these very intense environments, okay, in these intense situations, how do you encourage or how do you manage competition between team members, right? So that it's like a healthy competition, but not like a toxic competition to get things done.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the most common scenario you'll see is, I think I've seen a couple of different scenarios. So one is from just like a product architecture standpoint, where like someone is trying to like go about doing something a certain way, and then someone disagrees, and everyone is moving very fast, and that leads to disagreement, and oh, I'm right versus you're right, and this is the right way to go about it. I think having the sort of like culture of designing features before you implement them, particularly in these situations, getting the team to agree or disagree and move forward on particular designs for the feature or the product itself is the right approach to take here, so that these don't happen in the shadows or like away from the rest of the team. So work on feature design ahead of time, get the team to quickly agree and resolve any issues, and then move on from there. The second sort of type of competition obviously you see is if you have multiple people on the team that are looking at this business critical project as a growth opportunity for them, that can give them like lots of visibility, that can give them lots of impact. I think if you're in like these move fast high performance tech companies, you do encounter folks who are there for the growth. Like, they are ready to put in the work and they want to see equivalent growth. And so I think if it is on you as a manager to build the sort of right team for it. If you have multiple people on the team that are looking for similar growth, I think you have to choose who's the most effective person for that project and have them be in that project. And if you have people that are able to play similar roles, that's where I talked about have sub teams where you can have similar types of people looking for similar things in the project, have ownership and drive things on their own.
Okay. You worked at the gaming company, right? You worked at Meta, which has a reputation for moving very quickly and doing lots of things. Now you're at Google. So we've talked a lot about these business critical projects. Could you maybe just share an anecdote or two of some maybe seemingly insurmountable project you had and how you overcame it, or maybe one that wasn't successful, just to bring it home on a concrete level?
Yeah, I think the example is shared about the gaming company and like the business critical project there. That project, after it shipped, was did not succeed. It was a new game that we'd released. And despite going through all of this, all of the, like, that's the thing about like motivation and working hard. Like, we were very motivated. Like I said, we put in long hours, we put in weekends, we took on responsibilities that weren't core expectations of engineers. And we were really excited to be working on that project. But the sort of like the ending of it, it deflated the whole team. And the end product, when it shipped, it didn't succeed at all. It didn't do well as a game, which is common in the gaming industry. But we were in a pretty large gaming company that had some very successful titles. And so a lot of these are like learning opportunities. So like you look back and you think about, okay, like at what point did it switch from this team of highly motivated engineers to people that no longer wanted to work on this? I think that's an important thing to look back and consider.
Yeah, it's interesting because not only like not a lot of games aren't successful, but I've heard this too from friends that worked at gaming companies that they're very well known for burning people out at crunch time to get a game out. That's just part of the culture there.
Yep.
So it doesn't sound like that's normally what happens. Rajesh, is anything else maybe I should have asked you about these business critical projects? Anything else you'd like to share that you've learned about them with people?
I'd say if you're an engineering manager in like the tech companies, you're going to encounter these one way or another. I think even if your team is fairly well shielded, something will drop on your lap one day and say, okay, turn off all the roadmaps. This is your project now. I've heard from my team firsthand, and a lot of engineers and engineering teams don't like having roadmaps switched. Hey, we've been working on this. Like, why are you switching this up? And so I'd say the best way to think about it and like the sort of thought process you should inculcate on your team is that as a business, you always have to respond to market trends. And if your roadmap is switching for your company responding to a market trend, then I think that is the most important thing. Inculcate this thinking that roadmaps are always flexible, that they can always be switched, and you won't see as much disappointment on the team. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Nice. Rajesh, you've been really generous with your time. I want to thank you for coming on to Managers Club. Where could people reach out to you later if they want to get to know you or talk more about this?
You can reach out to me on my LinkedIn. I'll have a link posted there.
Will do. I'll share it in the notes. Again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.